I can remember when I was first hired here in 2004. People were already saying, "You guys need to be thinking about the next ethanol," because it was like you already got this thing. And then when the RFS passed in 2007, it was like job done. No, it wasn't even close to being done. Ethanol has continued to be that thing. It's higher blends. It's the how do we work through policies? How do we start exporting ethanol to the rest of the world so they can use it like we are using it? It's so important to us. We're investing in staff, full-time staff, just thinking about ethanol right here. I don't know when it'll be done, when you could check ethanol off as corn farmers, go worry about something else, but it's not even close to being done.
And I'll be honest with you, I've been on the board, retired last year, was on there almost 20 years. I was one of those board members. You heard me say it. What's the next ethanol? And I still believe there's other things we need to focus on. And I think we do when we spend a lot of time on lots of other ideas, lots of other promotions. But for me, as a grower and a board member, I have been surprised at how much we have had to focus on ethanol and how much it has expanded. Unleaded 88, for example, and who knows what's coming next. And like you said, the exports. But it's just always been the focus is ethanol.
It is, but we've never forgotten about the livestock industry. It's always going to be this huge customer of corn. There are other new uses, and we'll focus on those. But when ethanol uses up about a third of our corn that we're producing, it's got to have a large part of our attention, and it is the growth one. Right now, it's viewed as the lowest hanging fruit for corn demand is ethanol exports. How do we teach the rest of the world to use 10% ethanol like we are?
And that'll just come from sitting at the table and keeping on working on lobbying and working all those different programs and policies.
Exactly. And groups like the U.S. Grains Council, which is funded with checkoff dollars, and it goes back to that. Got to have the policies, you got to have the checkoff.
I know I have a question. Since I've been off the board for pushing a year or so, I know the Next Generation Fuels Act is something you're working on now. Kind of fill me in on that. I'm not sure where you're going with that.
The whole next phase of biofuels policy, RFS has made its way. It's marched up to 2022. That's when the volumes, kind of tabled off. Okay. Now you got to figure out what's the next thing that's going to increase demand, and that's going to be the Next Generation Fuels Act, which is a bill. We've been working on this for years with the auto industry. It's about having a completely different engine, not a flex fuel engine like we have for E85 and the truck that I drive. This one's a dedicated high octane engine, and they can pin this so that they can make this thing hum on something that might take 20 or 30% ethanol. It'll have the octane rate that they can really make. Those auto engineers are amazing. But they can really make this thing reach all of the goals that the EPA, all the air quality goals that they need to reach. They can do it with that type of a dedicated fuel. But we're talking about a change in our fuel system. It'll take years to do, but the Next Generation Fuels Act would be the trigger that would cause auto manufacturers to start building the kind of cars that could clean up the air just the way that the United States needs it. And so the Next Generation Fuels Act fixes a lot of those issues that have been stumbling blocks for ethanol, but it also sets us up for the future. And there's no requirements. It's just except for you got to make these vehicles, and they want to. The autos want to have an option besides an electric vehicle. They want to have other options because not every consumer wants an electric. They want to have these internal combustions into the future. It's going to be with something that's high octane.
Back then, the Marathons of the world, the Exxons, all of them hated ethanol. I don't think they're there now.
It was viewed as if you get a gallon of ethanol in the market, you have to take a gallon of gasoline out, and so we're in competition only. Right. And the irony of the whole thing was that the ethanol industry had to count on the petroleum industry to carry ethanol to the market. It was always blended with their product. It's the only way it could get to the market was through the people that really didn't like it very much. But you're right, it has come a long way. We've kind of come to a point where, today we have a working relationship with API. Marathon right here in Ohio. We have a good working relationship because we both know that liquid fuels in the future depends on we both are counting on a liquid fuel future. And without having both of us working together, uh, the world could go electric.
Yeah, it could go electric. And you think about that. It is the people on this board over the last 20 years or 15 years that developed that relationship. You kept going to Washington D.C. We'd meet with the American Petroleum Institute. We'd meet with these representatives from these oil companies and producers, and without the representation from those board members, that would have never happened because they wouldn't have understood the agricultural side of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing. We're not always going to agree with each other on there. There's going to be some times when we have to disagree. But if you step back and start looking at the future, it counts on us working together.
It does, like you said, or it could all be electric.